The ballroom glittered like a cathedral of money. Crystal chandeliers trembled under applause as Christopher Stevens raised his glass and called his wife to the stage. Shannon Stevens walked into the light without knowing she had already been made the punchline. Behind her, the screen flashed a contract $120, 00000. Her signature at the bottom. The room laughed when Christopher said even my wife signed off on it. They thought it was a joke. What they didn't know, what Shannon herself did not yet know, was that the contract funded the woman standing 3 feet away from her, wearing Christopher's favorite cologne. Emails remember, bank wires leave trails, and humiliation once made public becomes evidence. If you believe silence doesn't mean weakness, stay with this story until the end. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. I always read the comments. And if stories about quiet strength and real justice matter to you, consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. Shannon Stevens had built her life on documentation, not emotion, not confrontation, documentation. At 42, she was the director of contract compliance at Stevens Capital Holdings, the private investment firm her husband Christopher Stevens had inherited and then multiplied into something sharper, louder, more visible. Publicly, she was introduced as the steady one. Privately, she was the mechanism that kept the company from bleeding. She woke at 5:30 every morning without an alarm. Coffee brewed while she reviewed overnight emails on her tablet. She preferred to read slowly, line by line, flagging clauses that felt swollen with ambiguity. Words mattered. Placement mattered. The absence of a comma could cost millions. Christopher used to admire that about her. Now he called it overcautious. Their townhouse on the Upper East Side was quiet in the mornings. The marble floors carried sound too well, so Shannon moved lightly. Christopher rarely woke before 7 unless he had a televised interview. On those days, he rehearsed in the mirror. On ordinary days, he scrolled through headlines that mentioned his name. From the outside, they looked intact. Charity galas, foundation boards, photographs with senators and tech founders. Shannon stood half a step behind him in most pictures, not because she was instructed to, but because she preferred observation to display. Christopher had learned long ago that silence could be reframed. "She trusts me," he would say when asked why she didn't speak during panels. It was a convenient interpretation. At Stevens Capital Holdings, Shannon's office sat on the 17th floor, one level below Christopher's corner suite. She chose that deliberately when the building was renovated. Close enough to access, far enough to think. Her desk was immaculate. Physical contracts were rare now. Most lived in encrypted servers. But Shannon still printed critical pages, signature blocks, indemnity clauses, termination provisions, and stored them in labeled binders. She liked the weight of paper. Digital files could be replaced. Paper resisted erasure. Margaret Whitmore, General Counsel, often stopped by in the late afternoons. Margaret was in her late 50s, precise in both speech and tailoring. She had once told Shannon quietly, "Your husband is brilliant with growth, less so with restraint." It was as close to criticism as Margaret allowed herself. Recently, the pace of approvals had accelerated. Christopher had begun sending contracts directly to Shannon's inbox, marked time-sensitive executive approval needed. That phrasing was new. Typically, contracts passed through legal review, compliance, and finance before landing on her desk for final verification. Now they arrived late in the evening. Routine authorizations, Christopher would say if she hesitated. Vendor renewals. Marketing expansions. "We can't stall momentum." Momentum! It was his favorite word. Shannon did not object aloud. She adjusted her process instead. She began keeping a separate notebook, thin, leather-bound, undated. Each page recorded date, file name, version number, time received, time signed, observations. She didn't accuse. She cataloged. 3 weeks before the ballroom celebration, she noticed something subtle. A consulting agreement for a new media initiative appeared twice in her inbox within 12 hours. The file names were nearly identical. The second included a suffix _final2. When she opened it, the summary page looked unchanged. Compensation structure, performance metrics, standard language. She signed. Later that night, Christopher poured wine and told her they were entering a transformative phase. She watched the way he avoided specifics. "Who's leading the campaign?" she asked. "You'll meet her soon," he said. Her. The pronoun settled quietly in Shannon's mind. The next morning, Margaret Whitmore stopped by holding a folder she didn't usually carry. "Did you review the Hale Strategic Amendment?" Margaret asked. Shannon looked up. "Yes, it came through last night." Margaret hesitated, then nodded. "Good. Just making sure it was cleared." Something in her tone was compressed. "Is there an issue?" Shannon asked. Margaret chose her words carefully. "No issue, just a shift in scope." Scope was elastic in corporate language. It could mean expansion. It could mean risk. After Margaret left, Shannon reopened the file. She scrolled beyond the summary page this time, deeper into Exhibit A. The performance incentives were structured unusually large milestone payouts, triggered by brand engagement metrics, rather than revenue performance. Aggressive, but not illegal. She made a note in her notebook, Exhibit A, Incentive-Heavy Verify Reporting Metrics. Christopher began coming home later that week. Not dramatically late, just late enough. He wore a new cologne. Woodsy unfamiliar. Shannon did not comment. She placed the scent alongside other observations, missed dinners, distracted replies, the way his phone tilted away from her when it lit up. Silence was not ignorance. It was timing. At work, Liam Porter, Christopher's executive assistant, became more visible on Shannon's floor. Liam was efficient mid-30s with the alert posture of someone who understood proximity to power. "Mr. Stevens wants expedited processing on the Hale media rollouts," Liam said one afternoon. "They're already approved," Shannon replied evenly. "Yes, ma'am. He just wants confirmation that compliance won't slow activation." Compliance did not slow activation. It ensured survival. "Activation proceeds within policy," she said. Liam nodded too quickly. By the second week, Shannon sensed a choreography forming around her. Documents bypassed standard channels. Finance confirmed transfers with unusual urgency. Daniel Reeves, the CFO, avoided eye contact in meetings when the Hale initiative was mentioned. Christopher, meanwhile, was radiant in public. He spoke at a financial summit about strategic storytelling and humanizing capital. He praised visionary partnerships. Shannon watched the live stream from her office, noting that he did not mention names. That night, an embossed invitation arrived by courier. "Celebration of Strategic Partnership, Grand Ballroom, the Dominion Hotel," a black tie. Christopher placed it on the kitchen counter as though it were a peace offering. "I'd like you there," he said. She studied his face. He looked almost eager. "Of course," she replied. The invitation listed a special acknowledgement segment. No details. In the days leading up to the event, Shannon reviewed internal logs again. Not obsessively. Methodically. She requested a standard access report from IT under the pretext of quarterly auditing. Ethan Caldwell, head of IT security, delivered it without suspicion. "Everything normal?" he asked. "For now," she said. The logs showed multiple late-night accesses to the Hale contract folder from Christopher's executive credentials. That in itself was not irregular. CEOs reviewed major deals. But there had also been a file modification timestamp 17 minutes before her signature entry. 17 minutes. She did not jump to conclusions. She circled the time in her notebook. 17 minutes could mean nothing, or everything. The night before the celebration, Christopher stood before the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks. "Big night," he said lightly. "For the company," Shannon replied. "For us," he corrected. She met his gaze in the reflection. "Is it?" He smiled. "The kind that photographed well?" "You'll see." Shannon did not ask what she was meant to see. She had already begun looking. What she did not yet know, but what the narrator understands with cold clarity, was that Christopher believed control of the narrative equaled control of reality. He believed public applause could overwrite private truth. He believed a signature once projected 30 feet tall would silence doubt. He had underestimated the woman who kept records. In her notebook beneath the circled timestamp, Shannon added a final line before closing it for the evening verify original file hash. Then she turned off the light. The ballroom awaited. And so did the evidence. The document had arrived at 10:43 p.m. Shannon remembered the exact time because she had already brushed her teeth and set her phone on the nightstand when the notification chimed. Christopher was in his study downstairs. The door half closed, his voice low, and measured through a headset. She almost ignored the alert. Almost. The subject line read, "Hail Strategic Media. Final authorization required tonight." She had hesitated for 3 full seconds before opening it. Inside were 3 attachments: Master Services Agreement Amendment, Exhibit AA Performance Schedule, Executive Summary. Christopher appeared in the bedroom doorway moments later, as if summoned by the glow of her screen. "Sorry," he said, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. "We're pushing this through before markets open in Tokyo." "Legal reviewed it?" she asked. "Yes." Margaret cleared it. He stepped inside. "It's a scope expansion. Marketing acceleration." Shannon opened the executive summary first. It was clean, professional, the kind of document that anticipated scrutiny and neutralized it. It described a strategic partnership with Hale Strategic Media to amplify brand positioning across digital platforms, investor channels, and emerging markets. Total projected allocation, $120,000,000 over 3 years. Large but not unprecedented. She scrolled. Compensation was structured around performance triggers, engagement thresholds, subscriber growth, international visibility benchmarks. Aggressive targets, aggressive payouts. Christopher stood behind her now. Not touching. Just close enough to compress the air. "Anything unusual?" he asked. She clicked into Exhibit A. The first page displayed milestone tiers. The formatting was consistent with prior agreements. Bullet points, clean margins. She did not scroll all the way to the bottom. The Master Services Amendment referenced prior drafts she had reviewed 2 days earlier. Those drafts had carried the same vendor name, same framework, 17 minutes. That number would matter later. At that moment, it did not exist. "Looks consistent," she said quietly. Christopher exhaled a small release. "We're late on this already," he added. "The board's excited." She opened the signature page. Her name appeared beneath the line designated for executive compliance authorization. She had signed thousands of documents over the years. Each one felt procedural, necessary, controlled. She applied her digital signature at 10:51 p.m. The system confirmed document executed. Christopher leaned down and kissed her temple. "Thank you," he said. It was the first affectionate gesture in weeks. Downstairs, his voice resumed on the headset within minutes. Shannon lay awake longer than usual. Not suspicious, not yet, just unsettled. The next morning, she reviewed the executed version stored in the central server. It appeared identical. File name hellstrategic_MSA_final2.pdf. The suffix caught her attention. She was certain the earlier draft she had skimmed 2 days prior ended in _RevFinal. Small difference, possibly nothing. She compared the executive summary to the archive draft. Identical language, identical bullet points. When she opened Exhibit A this time and scrolled to the last page, she noticed something new. A clause granting discretionary bonus multipliers at the CEO's approval, independent of metric verification. That language had not been present in the version she remembered reviewing. She did not assume memory failure. She assumed revision. Shannon checked the document history log. Last modified 10:34 p.m., signed 10:51 p.m., 17 minutes. The modification occurred under executive credentials. Christopher Stevens. Her face remained still. There were legitimate reasons for executive edits, clarifying language, adjusting internal references. But significant compensation clauses typically required legal reapproval. She forwarded the document to Margaret Whitmore with a simple note, confirming final version matches legal's last review. S. Margaret responded 22 minutes later. Will verify. The brevity was unlike her. At 3:17 p.m., Margaret appeared at Shannon's office door. Do you have a moment, she asked. Shannon gestured to the chair across from her desk. Margaret closed the door before sitting. There was a minor adjustment to Exhibit A late last night, she said carefully. By whom? Shannon asked. Christopher. Without legal revision, Margaret paused. He assured me it was cosmetic. Shannon held her gaze. Was it Margaret's fingers tightened around the folder in her lap? The bonus multipliers were expanded how discretionary authority moved exclusively to him. That aligned with what Shannon had seen. Why, she asked. Margaret inhaled slowly. He said the partnership required flexibility. Flexibility. Shannon nodded once. I appreciate the clarification, she said. Margaret studied her. You're not concerned concern required evidence? I'm verifying process, Shannon replied. After Margaret left, Shannon opened the vendor registration file for Hale Strategic Media LLC. The entity had been incorporated 8 months earlier in Delaware. Registered agent listed. Business address in Manhattan, shared floor space with several other startups. Principal contact, Victoria Hale. The name hovered in Shannon's mind. She searched internal communications for Victoria Hale. Results populated instantly. Christopher had exchanged a series of emails with Victoria over the past 6 months. Strategy calls, brand positioning meetings, travel arrangements. Nothing explicitly inappropriate. But the tone shifted gradually from formal to familiar. Looking forward to dinner, let's refine the pitch. Don't worry, I'll handle Shannon. That last line had been buried in a forwarded thread. Shannon reread it twice. Context could soften it or sharpen it. She checked the metadata of the signed contract again. The file hash unique digital fingerprint did not match the earlier draft stored in archive. That confirmed substantive alteration. She printed both versions. Side by side, the changes were surgical. Addition of discretionary bonus clause. Adjustment of reporting verification authority from third-party audit to internal review. Expansion of milestone payout percentages. Each modification increased executive control. And financial exposure. Christopher had not altered the vendor name. He had altered leverage. That evening, he arrived home buoyant. Everything's locked in, he said, loosening his tie. This partnership will redefine us. Redefine in what direction, Shannon asked. Visibility, influence, and risk, she asked softly. He smiled, almost indulgently. You always see risk first. That's my role. He poured 2 glasses of wine. You signed it, he said. That's what matters. The words lingered longer than they should have. She studied him. Why did you modify Exhibit A without routing it back to legal, she asked. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. It was minor. It affected compensation authority. Within my purview, not without disclosure. He set his glass down with controlled precision. Do you trust me, he asked. Trust was not the same as verification. I trust process, she answered. Silence expanded between them. Christopher's jaw tightened briefly before he forced a lighter tone. You'll understand at the celebration, he said. There it was again. Celebration. As if the contract were already a triumph rather than a liability. Later that night, while Christopher slept, Shannon reopened the email chain. She expanded hidden header data. The final version of Exhibit A had been uploaded from Christopher's personal executive login at 10:34 p.m., exactly 9 minutes before he entered the bedroom. The prior version, the one she believed she had reviewed 2 days earlier, contained no discretionary clause. Someone had counted on time pressure, on proximity, on trust. Shannon did not cry. She did not confront. She created a secure external backup of both file versions and emailed the encrypted archive to a private address she maintained for compliance redundancy. Then she wrote in her notebook, 10:34 p.m., Exhibit A modified. Clause expanded. No legal reapproval? Intent unclear. She did not yet write the word betrayal, because betrayal implied emotion. And what she was building required clarity. In another part of the city, Victoria Hale reviewed a preview of the ballroom stage design. Her name would appear beside the Stevens Capital logo in silver lettering. Christopher had promised her visibility. He had not explained the mechanics of how that visibility would be secured. He believed Shannon would never dig beyond the summary page. He believed her restraint equaled blindness. He believed the narrative would protect him. What he did not understand was this: Shannon Stevens never stopped at the summary page. She just chose when to turn it. The perfume was not subtle. It lingered in the hallway before Christopher even removed his coat. Something floral, edged with amber, and a sweetness that did not belong to Shannon's restrained collection of scents. She preferred clean notes, citrus linen, something that disappeared rather than announced itself. This fragrance stayed. Shannon stood at the kitchen island, reviewing a printed spreadsheet of vendor disbursements. She did not look up immediately when he entered. "Long day?" she asked, as she always did. "Productive," Christopher replied. He hung his coat, carefully smoothing the lapel, as if he could smooth the air around him as well. The perfume drifted again. Shannon lifted her eyes then. Not accusatory, observational. "New client dinner?" she asked. "Something like that," he said. He crossed the room, leaned in to kiss her cheek. The scent transferred faintly onto her skin. She did not flinch. "Victoria Hale?" she asked lightly. Christopher paused just a fraction too long. "You'll meet her properly at the celebration," he said. "She's the face of the new media initiative." Face. The word settled differently now that Shannon had reviewed the contract modifications. "She must be very persuasive," Shannon replied. "She's talented," Christopher corrected. "Visionary." Shannon nodded once. After he went upstairs, she walked to the coat rack and lifted the sleeve of his wool overcoat. The perfume was strongest there, embedded in fabric rather than skin. She did not search for lipstick stains. She did not check his phone. She returned to her spreadsheet and circled 3 line items tied to Hale Strategic Media, LLC. The initial retainer had already been wired $8.5 million. That aligned with the milestone schedule. It was the pre-launch advisory bonus that caught her attention. $2.2 million. No corresponding performance trigger. Discretionary authority, CEO. The clause added at 10:34 p.m. She wrote in her notebook, retainer released. Advisory bonus processed. Confirm authorization path. The next morning at the office, Shannon stopped by finance before going to her own floor. Daniel Reeves looked up from his dual monitors, expression tightening slightly when he saw her. "Morning," she said calmly. "Shannon, what can I help with? I'm reviewing the Hale disbursements. Can you walk me through approval routing for the advisory bonus?" Daniel adjusted his glasses. "It came through executive channel," he said. "Marked urgent, supporting documentation." He hesitated. "Internal memo from Christopher. Any performance validation not required under current Exhibit A." Shannon nodded. "Send me the memo." Daniel forwarded it while she stood there. The memo was brief. Subject: Advisory Acceleration Bonus. Hale Strategic Justification, Strategic Brand Alignment, and Early Engagement exceeding expectations. Approved, CS. No metrics attached. "Thank you," Shannon said. Daniel watched her carefully. "Is there an issue I'm auditing?" "Flow consistency," she replied. He nodded, but his discomfort remained. Back upstairs, Shannon opened the company calendar shared by executive leadership. The celebration at the Dominion Hotel was 3 nights away. A run of show schedule had been attached. 6:45 p.m., investor reception, 7:30 p.m. Formal remarks, Christopher Stevens. 7:50 p.m., strategic partnership. Reveal 8:00 p.m. Champagne toast under reveal. There was a subnote. Acknowledgement of executive compliance support. That phrase did not appear accidental. She printed the schedule. In the afternoon, Liam Porter appeared at her doorway. "Mr. Stevens wanted to confirm you'll attend Thursday," he said. "I've accepted," she replied. "He's planning something." "Special." "For the company?" she asked. "For both of you," Liam said carefully. His eyes dropped for a moment. Shannon watched that small fracture in composure. "Thank you, Liam," she said. After he left, she closed her office door. She reopened the contract metadata logs and ran a deeper version comparison. The modification at 10:34 p.m. had not only altered Exhibit A, it had removed a prior clause requiring third-party audit verification before bonus release. That clause deletion had occurred in the same edit session. She leaned back in her chair. This was no longer cosmetic. This was structural. Margaret Whitmore responded to Shannon's earlier verification email with a follow-up request. Stop by when available. Margaret's office felt different that afternoon. The blinds were partially drawn, filtering Manhattan's light into muted stripes. "I've reviewed the prior draft against the executed version," Margaret said without preamble. And Shannon asked. The audit verification clause was removed in the final file. "Were you informed?" Margaret hesitated. "He mentioned flexibility." "That's not what I asked." Margaret held her gaze. "No." Silence lingered between them. Shannon said evenly, "If discretionary bonuses are being issued without audit verification, compliance exposure increases. I'm aware." Margaret replied quietly, "Why wasn't legal revision required?" Margaret's shoulders straightened. "Because the CEO executed the modification. That doesn't bypass governance?" "No," Margaret agreed. "It doesn't." They both understood the implication. Christopher had relied on position to override process. "What are you planning?" Margaret asked gently. Shannon considered the question. "I'm gathering clarity," she said. Margaret studied her for a long moment. "If you need independent counsel," she said, "don't delay." The suggestion hung between them, careful and deliberate. That evening, Shannon stood before her closet considering dresses she had worn to prior galas. Navy silk, charcoal satin, understated, controlled. She selected a simple black gown with clean lines, no sequins, no spectacle. Christopher entered the room, adjusting his cufflinks again, rehearsing confidence. "You'll look stunning," he said. "That's not the objective," she replied. He laughed softly, misreading her tone as humor. "Trust me," he said. "This night changes everything." He meant it as promise. It sounded like warning. In another part of the city, Victoria Hale stood before her own mirror in a penthouse apartment leased under her LLC. A stylist adjusted the hem of a silver gown. Christopher had texted earlier, "Ready for your moment." Victoria smiled at the message. She believed the celebration would formalize her position, not just professionally. She did not know Shannon had compared file hashes. She did not know bank wires left indelible timestamps. She believed narrative was enough. The morning of the event, Shannon arrived at the office earlier than usual. She requested a comprehensive access log for the Hale contract folder covering the previous 60 days. Ethan Caldwell delivered it electronically. "Routine?" he asked. "Quarterly compliance sweep," she answered. He nodded. The log confirmed what she suspected: repeated after-hours access from Christopher's credentials, including file downloads to external drives. She flagged the entries. She did not accuse. At 4:00 p.m., she closed her laptop and placed the printed logs into her leather portfolio. In her notebook, she wrote, "Celebration observed statements. Capture language." She was not preparing for confrontation. She was preparing for documentation. As the car pulled up to the Dominion Hotel that evening, flashbulbs flickered along the curb. Investors stepped out of town cars, laughter spilling into the humid air. Christopher offered his arm. She took it. Inside the ballroom, shimmered under chandeliers that reflected gold across polished marble floors. A massive LED screen displayed the Stevens Capital logo in rotating animation. At the center of the room stood Victoria Hale, silver gown, amber perfume, Christopher's favorite cologne. Their eyes met across the crowd. Victoria smiled, polished, confident, unaware. Shannon felt no surge of jealousy, only alignment. Data aligning with scent, clause aligning with wire transfer, modification aligning with motive. Christopher leaned close to Shannon's ear. "Just follow my lead," he whispered. She looked at him calmly. "I always follow process," she said. He didn't hear the difference. The program began. Applause swelled. And somewhere beneath the music, beneath the laughter, beneath the glittering spectacle, a quiet record was already being written. The Dominion Hotel's grand ballroom had been designed to intimidate. 30-foot ceilings, crystal chandeliers cascading like frozen rain, gold-trimmed columns rising toward painted fresco panels that depicted allegories of industry and progress. Everything in the room suggested permanence power legacy. Christopher thrived in rooms like this. Shannon observed them. Investors clustered near the bar, their laughter calibrated and controlled. Board members stood in small, strategic circles, each group subtly angled toward the stage, as though proximity to the podium granted influence. Financial journalists hovered at the edges, rehearsing questions they would not ask unless invited. A string quartet played something classical but unobtrusive music, chosen not for emotion, but for atmosphere. Christopher's hand rested lightly at Shannon's back as they moved through the crowd. "Smile," he murmured without turning his head. She did. Not brightly, not theatrically, just enough. Christopher, a venture partner, called out, "Big night, the beginning of something transformative." Christopher replied, voice warm and resonant, "Transformative." He had used that word before. Shannon registered every repetition. Across the room, Victoria Hale stood beneath a soft halo of overhead lighting, speaking animatedly to two marketing executives. She was striking in silver, elegant, without restraint. Her confidence was not the quiet kind. It filled space. When she noticed Christopher, her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, chin-lifting shoulders, straightening smile, sharpening. There was recognition there, and ownership. Christopher released Shannon's back as he approached Victoria. "Victoria," he said, extending his hand with polished familiarity. "You look extraordinary." "Thank you," Victoria replied. Her eyes flickered briefly to Shannon. "Mrs. Stevens." "Shannon," she corrected gently. Victoria's smile did not falter. "Of course." They shook hands. Victoria's perfume confirmed what Shannon had already deduced in her hallway days earlier. Amber, floral, persistent. "I've heard so much about your compliance precision," Victoria said smoothly. "Christopher says nothing moves without your approval." There was admiration in her tone. Or performance of admiration. "Process protects everyone," Shannon replied. Victoria's eyes lingered for half a second too long. "Yes," she said softly, "it does." Christopher shifted between them, reclaiming control of the interaction. "We're about to begin," he announced. "I want you both near the front. Both." The word carried weight. Shannon allowed herself to be guided toward a round table positioned within direct sightline of the stage. A place of visibility. Intentional visibility. She noted the seating arrangement. Board members to the right. Major investors to the left. A clear aisle leading from her chair to the podium. Her chair was not tucked discreetly toward the back. It was positioned as part of the narrative. The lights dimmed slightly. The string quartet softened into silence. A master of ceremonies introduced Christopher Stevens as the visionary behind Stevens Capital's bold new chapter. Applause rose in a practiced swell. Christopher took the stage with ease. He did not glance at notes. "Thank you," he began, voice amplified and controlled. "Tonight, we celebrate partnership, innovation, courage." He spoke about market shifts, digital expansion, storytelling as leverage. He framed the Hale strategic partnership as inevitable, a natural evolution of forward-thinking leadership. Shannon listened not to content, but to structure. He was building towards something. "When we first envisioned this initiative," Christopher continued, "I knew it required more than ambition. It required trust. Trust. He let the word linger. And I'm fortunate, he said, turning slightly toward Shannon's table, to have a partner in life who believes in our mission as deeply as I do. A spotlight shifted. It found her. Applause rippled politely. Shannon remained composed. Christopher smiled down at her. My wife Shannon oversees compliance with a rigor that keeps us grounded, he said. And even she signed off on this partnership. Laughter fluttered through the room. Light laughter, indulgent laughter. He gestured toward the screen behind him. The LED display flickered, then resolved into a document. The final page, the signature block. Her name clean and unmistakable. Shannon Stevens. The amount displayed in bold above it, $120,000,000. A few guests leaned forward. Some murmured in impressed disbelief. Christopher laughed lightly into the microphone. That's how confident we are, he said. If Shannon signs it, you know it's bulletproof. More laughter. But beneath the humor was something sharper. A suggestion that she had vetted it, endorsed it, authenticated it. Shannon felt the heat of the spotlight intensify. She did not rise. She did not wave. She observed. Victoria had stepped closer to the stage now, framed by soft uplighting. She watched Shannon with an expression that hovered between triumph and calculation. Christopher extended his hand toward the aisle. Shannon, he called warmly. Why don't you join me? The invitation was public. Refusal would be conspicuous. Shannon stood. Her heels made no sound against the carpet as she walked the aisle toward the stage. She could feel eyes tracking her, evaluating her composure. She noted who avoided eye contact. She noted who smiled too quickly. Christopher took her hand as she reached him. The gesture appeared affectionate, possessive. He held up the remote clicker and advanced the screen. The signature page zoomed larger. Her name expanded across 30 feet of LED light. Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher said, this deal is backed not just by strategy, but by scrutiny. Shannon read every page. There was a fractional pause, and she still signed. The room erupted in louder laughter. The implication was clear. If the cautious wife approved it, it must be safe. And if anything went wrong, the signature was visible. Shannon's mind did not race. It organized. He was prepositioning liability. He was converting her diligence into shield. She turned slightly toward the microphone. Christopher anticipated gratitude, a supportive remark, a reaffirmation. Instead, she spoke evenly. Compliance ensures transparency, she said calmly. Transparency ensures accountability. The room quieted, unsure how to interpret the statement. Christopher laughed lightly, smoothing the moment. And that, he said, is why we're unstoppable. Applause resumed. Victoria joined them on stage. Christopher introduced her as the visionary force behind Hale Strategic Media. Victoria delivered practiced remarks about alignment and growth. She thanked Christopher for his belief. She did not thank Shannon. When the champagne toast began, Christopher raised his glass. To partnership, he declared. Glasses clinked. Shannon lifted hers, but did not drink. From the stage, she had a clear view of the ballroom. She saw Daniel Reeves at his table, expression tight. She saw Margaret Whitmore watching her carefully. She saw Liam Porter near the back, hands clasped too rigidly. And she saw something else. A camera near the press section, recording continuously. Audio captured, video archived, public statements preserved. Christopher believed applause solidified reality. But public statements also created evidence. As the music resumed and guests flooded the dance floor, Shannon stepped down from the stage. Christopher leaned toward her. Perfect, he whispered. Exactly what I needed. Needed, not wanted. She turned to him. What did you need, Christopher? For everyone to see we're aligned, he said smoothly. Aligned. The word tasted different now. Victoria approached them again, champagne in hand. To bold decisions, she said brightly. Shannon met her gaze. Bold decisions require documentation, she replied. Victoria's smile flickered. Christopher tightened his grip around his glass. Later, as the evening blurred into polite congratulations and strategic handshakes, Shannon excused herself. She walked toward the exit corridor alone. No dramatic departure, no visible distress, just departure. As the ballroom doors closed behind her, the applause dimmed to a distant hum. Inside the ballroom, Christopher basked in affirmation. He believed the narrative was secured. He did not yet understand that humiliation once amplified under chandeliers could not be retracted. It could only be replayed. And Shannon Stevens never forgot what was said under bright lights. The hallway outside the grand ballroom was quieter than it should have been. Soundproofed doors sealed the laughter inside, reducing applause to a distant vibration in the walls. The carpet muffled Shannon's steps as she moved toward the elevators, her posture unchanged, her breathing measured. Behind her, the celebration continued. Champagne, handshakes, strategic photographs. Christopher remained on stage longer than necessary. He liked staying in the light. Shannon pressed the elevator button and waited. Her reflection in the mirrored panel revealed nothing fractured. No trembling hands, no reddened eyes. Only a woman who had just been repositioned publicly as both endorsement and insurance policy. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped inside alone. The descent was smooth. On the ride down, she replayed Christopher's exact words. "If Shannon signs it, you know it's bulletproof." And she still signed. Tone mattered. Inflection mattered. Pauses mattered. The laughter following those lines mattered most. Public framing was not accidental. It was architecture. By the time she reached the lobby, her phone vibrated. Christopher. She let it ring twice before answering. "Where are you?" he asked, irritation threaded beneath the charm. "Leaving," she said. "You left without telling me. You were occupied." A pause. "You could have stayed," he said. "This was important." "It was," she replied calmly. "Very important." Silence. "I needed you there," he said finally. "For optics?" she asked. "For support. Support doesn't require spectacle." His exhale sharpened. "You're overthinking this. I'm documenting it," she answered. He did not respond. "I'll see you at home," she said, and ended the call before he could recalibrate the conversation. Outside, the Manhattan air was thick with summer humidity. Car lights streaked along the avenue. Drivers waited in staggered lines for departing guests. Shannon requested a car and sat in the back seat without looking at her phone again. She did not cry. Humiliation had not landed as pain. It had landed as confirmation. Christopher had made a strategic decision on stage. He had converted her signature into public validation. If scrutiny emerged, investors would recall that Shannon Stevens, Director of Contract Compliance, had approved the deal. He had not only exposed her. He had preemptively insulated himself. The car moved through traffic. In the ballroom above, Victoria leaned toward Christopher. "She left early," Victoria observed. "She's sensitive," Christopher said lightly. Victoria tilted her head. "About what?" He smiled dismissive. "Details." But even as he said it, a thread of irritation tugged at him. Shannon had not reacted. She had not confronted him backstage. She had not displayed embarrassment. She had simply left. It unsettled him more than anger would have. Back at the townhouse, Shannon removed her heels and placed them neatly by the entryway. She set her leather portfolio on the dining table and removed the printed logs from inside. She turned on a small desk lamp instead of the overhead lights. The house felt larger in silence. She opened her laptop and searched for publicly available media coverage of the event. 2 financial bloggers had already posted images from the ballroom. There it was, a photograph of Christopher holding her hand beneath a giant screen displaying her signature. Caption, "Stevens Capital secures $120 million. Partnership wife signs off." She saved the image, not for sentiment, for timestamp. 11:07 p.m. She then searched for video. One journalist had uploaded a short clip to social media. Christopher's voice was clear, and even she signed. The laughter followed. She downloaded the clip before it could be edited or deleted. Her phone vibrated again. "Christopher." She did not answer. Instead, She opened the company's internal server through secure access and navigated to the Hale Strategic folder. She compared the executed contract displayed at the event with the archived version once more. The discretionary clause remained. The audit verification clause remained deleted. She cross-referenced the advisory bonus transfer timestamp with the contract modification. The wire had been initiated less than 24 hours after execution. Efficient, confident. She opened her notebook. Under the entry labeled Celebration Observed Statements, she added, Public acknowledgement linking compliance to approval. Implied full review. Recorded on video audience includes investors plus board. She underlined the last line. Board. Public statements before a board created expectations. Expectations created accountability. Midnight approached when the front door opened. Christopher entered without turning on the lights. "You're awake," he said. "Yes." He removed his jacket slowly, studying her across the dim room. "You embarrassed me," he said. She looked up. By leaving by not playing along with what he exhaled sharply. "It was a joke, Shannon. Lighten the room. Investors like personality. You positioned my signature as validation." "It is validation. Was the file modified 17 minutes before I signed it?" The question landed like a dropped glass. Christopher's jaw tightened. "Where did you get that idea, Logs?" He stared at her. "You're auditing me now, I'm auditing process. It's the same thing. Not if you followed it." Silence expanded. He stepped closer. "You think I jeopardized this company?" he asked. "I think you removed an audit verification clause." He did not deny it. It was unnecessary bureaucracy. It was protection. "For you," he snapped. "For the company," she corrected. "And what do you think I'm protecting?" he demanded. Shannon held his gaze. "Your discretion." The word hung heavy. Christopher looked away first. "You signed it," he said again, as if repetition could anchor responsibility. "Yes," she agreed calmly, "based on a prior version." He laughed once, short and humorless. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Turn this into something it's not." "What is it?" He hesitated. "A partnership." "With Victoria?" she asked. His silence answered. She did not flinch. "Are you involved with her?" she asked. "That's not relevant to the contract. It's relevant to motive." He stepped back. "You're making assumptions. I'm correlating data." He ran a hand through his hair. "You always need evidence," he muttered. "Yes. And if you find it, I'll follow procedure." The words were not a threat. They were promise. Christopher studied her differently now. He had expected anger, tears, accusation. Instead, he saw documentation forming behind her eyes. "You wouldn't damage us," he said quietly. "Us," she repeated. He softened his tone. "We've built everything together. Then transparency shouldn't frighten you." He said nothing. After a long moment, he walked upstairs without another word. Shannon remained at the table. She replayed the ballroom clip one more time, listening carefully to the cadence of Christopher's voice. Intent hid in tone. Then she opened a new folder on her encrypted drive. Title, Hale, Chronology. Inside, she created subfolders: contracts email headers, financial transfers, public statements, internal logs. She began organizing files accordingly. Outside, the city hummed through the night. Inside the townhouse, the air shifted subtly like pressure before a storm. Christopher believed the evening had cemented his narrative. He believed humiliation, once absorbed without protest, dissolved. He did not yet understand that Shannon's silence was not surrender. It was preparation. And preparation, once complete, does not require raised voices, only evidence. Christopher left the house before sunrise. Shannon heard the front door close at 5:12 a.m., a sharper sound than usual. He did not come into the bedroom before leaving. He did not attempt reconciliation. He retreated to the office, to narrative control. Shannon remained in bed for another 10 minutes, staring at the ceiling as dawn pressed faint light through the curtains. She was not replaying the argument. She was sequencing the next steps. Documentation first, interpretation later. By 6:00 a.m., She was at the dining table. Again, laptop, open notebook, aligned parallel to its edge. The folder labeled Hale Chronology sat at the center of her screen. She began with the email chain. The Hale Strategic Agreement had originated 6 months earlier as a modest exploratory discussion. She pulled the earliest thread from the archive. Subject: Initial Media Strategy Consultation. VH. The sender was Victoria Hale. The tone was professional, polished, ambitious. Shannon read forward chronologically. Over time, Christopher's responses grew warmer, less formal, more personal in their phrasing. Looking forward to dinner. Excited about what we're building. You understand the vision better than anyone. That last line was time-stamped 3 months before the contract expansion. Shannon did not pause at that sentence. She expanded the email headers. Full header data revealed routing paths, IP origins, authentication stamps. Most users never examined these layers. They trusted surface threads. Shannon trusted structure. The final version of Exhibit A had been attached to an internal forward from Christopher to Liam Porter at 10:31 p.m., the night she signed. Subject: Replace prior attachment. Use this. The attachment file name matched the executed contract. She cross-referenced timestamps. 10:31 p.m., Christopher sends revised file to Liam. 10:34 p.m., file modification, recorded in contract folder. 10:43 p.m. Shannon receives email labeled Final Authorization Required Tonight. 10:51 p.m., Shannon signs. 17 minutes between modification and execution. 9 minutes between file upload and email to her inbox. The window was narrow by design. She exported the full header of the 10:43 p.m. email and saved it in the email headers folder. Next, she opened the internal system log report Ethan Caldwell had provided the previous day. She searched for the Hale contract folder. Multiple access entries populated. Christopher Stevens, executive credentials. Liam Porter, assistant credentials. Margaret Whitmore, legal review credentials. She filtered by date. The 10:34 p.m. modification appeared again, linked exclusively to Christopher's executive login. No legal co-edit. No documented secondary approval. She leaned back slightly. Then she checked something more subtle. The log showed that earlier that evening, at 9:58 p.m., a version of Exhibit A had been downloaded externally under Christopher's credentials. Downloaded, edited offline, re-uploaded. That sequence required intent. It was not accidental adjustment. She printed the log pages and placed them into her portfolio. At 7:15 a.m., she sent a brief message to Ethan Caldwell, requesting confirmation of integrity logs for Hale folder covering last 72 hours. Please include hash validation reports. His reply came quickly. Sure. Is this compliance audit related? Yes. No elaboration. At the office, Stevens Capital Holdings felt different after the celebration. Employees spoke more softly around Shannon. News of the ballroom clip had circulated internally. Some saw her as endorsed authority. Others saw her as implicated. Daniel Reeves avoided direct eye contact in the morning meeting. Margaret Whitmore's expression remained composed, but there was new caution in it. Christopher arrived at 9:30 a.m., moving through the hallway with controlled charisma. He stopped at Shannon's office doorway. "Can we talk?" he asked. Later, she said evenly, "I'm reviewing system logs." His gaze sharpened. "You're escalating this. I'm documenting it." He stepped inside, closing the door halfway. "There's no scandal here," he said quietly. "You're inventing risk. Risk exists independent of acknowledgement." He exhaled. "Victoria's contract is strategic. Strategic contracts don't require stealth edits." He stared at her. "You think this is about her? It is about governance." He lowered his voice further. "Be careful. It was not a threat. It was caution. For himself. For what she asked calmly. For damaging something that doesn't need damage. Transparency doesn't damage," she said. He held her gaze for 3 seconds longer than necessary, then turned and left. Shannon returned to the logs. At 10:02 a.m., Ethan delivered the integrity report. Each file version had a unique hash value, digital fingerprint verifying content integrity. She compared the hash of the draft she remembered reviewing with the executed version. They differed. She printed both hash strings and annotated them with timestamps. Evidence did not need emotion. It needed alignment. Around noon, she received a notification that the advisory bonus had triggered a second scheduled disbursement, $3.5 million. The milestone description read, "Early engagement performance exceeded threshold." She opened the performance report attached. The metrics were internal analytic screenshots, no third-party verification. She wrote, "Audit clause removal directly enabled discretionary bonus distribution." Then she opened a new document titled Potential Exposure Preliminary Analysis. She outlined, governance bypass via executive edit, removal of independent audit clause, discretionary bonus authority, public representation of full compliance review, potential conflict of interest if personal relationship exists. She stopped at the last line, personal relationship. She had not yet confirmed it, but the email tone shifts perfume late nights, and Victoria's gaze on stage formed a pattern. At 2:00 p.m., Liam Porter appeared again. "Mr. Stevens would like the finalized hail folder sent to board distribution," he said. Shannon looked up. "Which version? The executed one?" "Include prior drafts for transparency," she replied. Liam hesitated. "Just the final. Board governance requires version history. I'll relay that." He left quickly. Within minutes, Christopher called her. "Send only the final," he said sharply. "That misrepresents revision history. It simplifies. It conceals." There was a long pause. "Are you threatening me?" he asked quietly. "No," she answered. "I'm protecting the company. You're making this adversarial. You made it public." Silence again. He ended the call without another word. Shannon saved the version history folder separately. At 4:30 p.m., she walked down to Margaret Whitmore's office. Margaret closed her door immediately. "You've seen the logs," Margaret said. "Yes." "And the audit clause removal materially altered oversight." Margaret nodded slowly. "If this surfaces," she said, "board scrutiny will be severe." "It already has surfaced," Shannon replied. "He referenced my approval publicly." Margaret's lips pressed thin. "Are you considering formal action?" "I'm considering independent counsel," Shannon said. Margaret did not attempt to dissuade her. "That would be prudent," she agreed. Back in her office, Shannon drafted an email to herself on her private encrypted account summarizing findings. She attached email header exports, hash comparison reports, system access logs, wire transfer confirmations, video clip from celebration. She labeled the message, "Chronology Preservation, Private Archive." Then she sent it. In another part of the building, Christopher stood by the window of his office phone pressed to his ear. "She's digging," he said quietly. Victoria's voice on the other end was tight. "What does that mean?" "It means she noticed." "You said she wouldn't." Christopher's jaw flexed. "She won't go nuclear. And if she does," he did not answer immediately. "She won't," he repeated. But uncertainty had entered his tone. Back at her desk, Shannon opened her notebook and wrote a single line beneath the previous entries. "Conflict of interest must be formally assessed." She closed the notebook. She did not feel rage. She felt clarity sharpening. Christopher believed narrative could outpace documentation. He believed public framing insulated private action. He had forgotten something fundamental. Documentation moves quietly. But once complete, it does not move backward. Money rarely lied. It concealed it, rerouted it, disguised itself under language like advisory, acceleration, discretionary, but it always left a timestamp. Shannon understood that better than most people in the building. By the end of the week, Hale Strategic Media LLC had received 2 additional transfers. The second was labeled Engagement Acceleration, Tier 1. The third, Brand Visibility Incentive, Early Activation. Each payment aligned with the revised Exhibit A structure. Each payment relied on the discretionary clause Christopher inserted 17 minutes before she signed. At 8:10 a.m., Shannon requested a formal financial breakdown from Daniel Reeves, not verbally, in writing. Subject, Request for supporting documentation. Hail strategic disbursement. She copied Margaret Whitmore. Documentation creates witnesses. Daniel responded within 15 minutes. Happy to provide. Can we discuss live? Yes, she replied. Bring full routing trail. When he entered her office later that morning, he carried a slim folder and the weight of someone who had already decided which side of risk he preferred. He closed the door behind him. You're escalating this beyond internal review, he said carefully. I'm standardizing review, Shannon replied. He placed the folder on her desk and opened it. Inside were wire confirmations, internal approval codes, and transaction routing logs. The first retainer, $8.5 million, had followed ordinary vendor onboarding procedures. The advisory bonus, $2.2 million, had bypassed standard milestone verification review and routed directly through executive override. The second bonus, $3.5 million, had been authorized with a short internal memo citing strategic acceleration. Who generated this memo? Shannon asked. Christopher Daniel answered. Any board awareness, not formally. She studied the transaction routing trail. Were there any additional disbursements beyond these? Daniel hesitated. There's a quarterly reserve allocation scheduled. How much? 20 million. Her eyes lifted. Scheduled when 30 days post-launch, and launch is defined as public reveal. The ballroom. So in 27 days, Shannon said quietly, another 20 million transfers. Daniel didn't deny it. That's aggressive, she added. It's structured, he replied. Structured under a clause that removed independent audit verification. He exhaled slowly. Shannon, I process what's approved, and if what's approved exposes fiduciary breach. His silence answered. She began marking the documents with small adhesive flags, yellow for discretionary approvals, blue for bypassed verification steps. Daniel, she said evenly, if conflict of interest exists between executive and vendor, failure to disclose constitutes material governance risk. He looked at her directly for the first time. Are you alleging that I'm asking whether disclosure occurred? He swallowed. No. Then we have two problems, she replied, structural exposure and non-disclosure. The room felt smaller. You're going to take this to the board, Daniel said. I'm going to consult counsel. That distinction mattered. Board escalation without counsel could be framed as internal dispute. Counsel reframed it as potential legal liability. Daniel gathered himself. If this becomes public, it already has, she said. He referenced compliance validation in front of investors. Daniel nodded slowly. I'll preserve financial records, he said. Good, she replied. After he left, Shannon updated her chronology folder. She created a new subfolder, Financial Exposure Escalation Risk. Inside, she added, wire confirmations, routing trail documentation, scheduled reserve allocation summary, advisory memos signed by Christopher. Then she opened the company's public relations feed. A larger financial outlet had now picked up coverage of the partnership. Headline: Stevens Capital expands digital footprint with $120 million strategic alliance. The article included a quote from Christopher. Our compliance leadership ensured this deal met the highest standards. Her name was mentioned again. Validation, shield, insulation. She saved the article as PDF. Public representation of internal governance created legal expectation. At 2:00 p.m. Shannon stepped outside the building and walked 3 blocks to a quiet cafe she rarely visited. She chose a corner table with her back to the wall. She opened her phone and searched for white-collar litigation attorneys in Manhattan. Not family law, not yet. Governance, corporate fraud, fiduciary breach. One name surfaced repeatedly: Rebecca Lawson, former federal prosecutor, now specializing in corporate misconduct and high-asset divorce litigation. Shannon read 3 case summaries: precision, discipline, discretion. She closed the browser. Not yet. Timing mattered. Back at the office, Christopher was in his element. He held strategy meetings, scheduled interviews, reviewed campaign rollouts with Victoria via video conference. From the glass walls of his office, he could see the city skyline, and beyond it, the idea of inevitability. He believed momentum was protection. Liam Porter entered cautiously mid-afternoon. "Board packet draft is ready," Liam said. "Send final hail contract only," Christopher instructed. Shannon requested version history be included. Christopher's jaw tightened. "She doesn't control narrative. She controls compliance," Liam said carefully. Christopher turned toward him. "Do you work for her or me?" "For Stevens Capital," Liam replied. The answer displeased him. "Send final only," Christopher repeated. Liam nodded and left. An hour later, Shannon received a copy of the draft board packet. The hail contract appeared only the executed version. No prior drafts, no red line history. She opened her email and replied to the distribution group for governance completeness version. History should be appended to ensure full transparency regarding Exhibit A revisions. She copied Margaret. She did not copy Christopher. 5 minutes later, her phone rang. "Stop," Christopher said without greeting. "Stop what undermining? Providing version history is not undermining. It suggests there was something to hide. Was there?" He went silent. "You're escalating a standard executive revision into a scandal," he said finally. "Executive revision that removed independent audit verification and authorized discretionary bonuses to a vendor with whom you have undisclosed personal involvement." She replied calmly. There it was, spoken plainly. "You don't know that," he said sharply. "Then disclose otherwise." The pause was longer this time. "Be careful," he said again, quieter. With what she asked, with destroying everything. She considered that. "Everything built on concealment destroys itself," she answered. She ended the call. In her office, the air felt cooler. She opened her notebook and added potential fiduciary breach if personal relationship confirmed. She underlined confirmed. She had not yet proven it. But pattern recognition had shifted into near certainty. That evening, as employees filtered out of the building, Shannon remained. She opened the server one more time and searched for calendar entries between Christopher and Victoria outside formal work channels. Several appeared labeled ambiguously strategy dinner, brand alignment offsite, creative session private. Locations varied, times extended late. She printed the list. At 7:40 p.m., her office phone buzzed. "Margaret Whitmore." "I saw your board email," Margaret said. "Yes. You're forcing a choice. Governance requires one." Margaret's voice lowered. "If you retain independent counsel, inform me." "I will." And Shannon. "Yes, once you move formally, it cannot be undone." Shannon looked at the growing stack of printed evidence. "I'm aware." After the call ended, she closed her laptop and placed the financial documents into her leather portfolio. She did not feel panic. She felt convergence. Email headers, hash discrepancies, wire transfers, public statements, undisclosed relationship. Each alone was a concern. Together, they formed architecture. Christopher believed applause insulated him. He believed her silence signaled reluctance. He did not yet understand that Shannon was no longer gathering suspicion. She was assembling a case, and cases once assembled do not argue loudly. They present. The audio file was not hidden. It was misplaced. That distinction mattered. On Monday morning, Shannon logged into the internal server to retrieve updated performance analytics tied to Hale Strategic Media. She navigated to the shared executive drive, a folder accessible to senior leadership and their assistants. Inside a subfolder labeled Launch Materials Draft, she found presentation slides, logo variations, and preliminary social engagement reports, and one file that did not belong. VH_CS_pre-launch notes.m4a. The naming convention was informal, personal. Shannon stared at it for 3 seconds before clicking. The timestamp indicated it had been uploaded 5 days earlier. The file length 0642. She adjusted her headphones and pressed play. Christopher's voice came first. "You're sure she won't comb through Exhibit A?" A pause. Victoria's voice followed, softer but unmistakable. "She reads summaries. Not every line. You said that yourself. Christopher exhaled faintly. She trusts structure? Victoria laughed quietly. Then let structure protect you. A Russell fabric against microphone. Christopher again. Once she signs, it's done. Public validation. No one questions compliance after that. Victoria's tone sharpened slightly. And the bonus clause handled. Good, she replied, because I'm not waiting 3 years for full payout. Another pause. Don't worry, Christopher said. You won't have to. The recording ended abruptly. Shannon did not replay it immediately. She removed her headphones and sat very still. The file had not been secured. It had not been encrypted. It had been casually saved in a shared executive folder, likely uploaded from a mobile device synced to the wrong directory. Carelessness often followed confidence. She checked the metadata, uploaded by Liam Porter's credentials. Timestamp 11:18 p.m. 5 days earlier. Likely automatic cloud synchronization from Christopher's device. She did not assume malice from Liam. She assumed sloppiness from Christopher. Shannon opened her notebook and wrote, Audio file premeditation discussion. Confirms awareness of clause plus reliance on signature. She did not use the word affair. The content did not require it. Motive had moved from inference to articulation. She exported the file to her encrypted private drive and immediately created a hash verification of the original file to preserve evidentiary integrity. Then she closed the shared folder without altering it. Preservation mattered more than exposure. At 9:15 a.m., she walked to Margaret Whitmore's office without sending an email first. Margaret looked up startled by the unannounced visit. I need 5 minutes, Shannon said. Margaret closed the door. What happened? Shannon placed her phone on the desk, headphones connected. Listen. Margaret listened without interruption. By the end of the recording, her expression had shifted from composure to calculation. That's significant, she said quietly. Yes. You've preserved it, yes. Has anyone else accessed it unknown? It's sitting in a shared drive. Margaret leaned back in her chair. If this is authentic and unaltered, it demonstrates intentional circumvention of compliance controls. It does, Shannon replied. And personal involvement, Margaret added. Yes. Silence followed. Margaret spoke carefully. You need independent counsel immediately. I'm aware. And Shannon, yes, if you pursue this formally, you are no longer simply director of compliance. I understand. You become adverse. Shannon nodded once. Margaret's gaze softened. I won't obstruct you. That was as close to allegiance as corporate loyalty allowed. Back in her office, Shannon received a calendar notification. Christopher had scheduled a private dinner with Victoria that evening. The invite title read, Post-Launch Debrief. Location a private dining room at an exclusive Midtown restaurant. She saved a screenshot of the calendar entry. At noon, Christopher entered her office without knocking. We need to stop this, he said. Stop what? You digging through private drives, shared executive drives. He closed the door firmly. You're crossing lines. Governance lines were crossed first. He studied her face, searching for anger. There was none. You found something, he said. Yes. What premeditation? His jaw tightened. You're exaggerating. I'm documenting. He took a step closer. This is still salvageable. Salvageable, she repeated. You don't have to escalate. You recorded a conversation about manipulating my review. He didn't deny the conversation. That was taken out of context, he said. Context rarely improves intent. His voice lowered. You'll destroy your own position. If governance fails publicly, I'm already destroyed. He fell silent. You're my wife, he said finally. I'm compliance. The words landed like a verdict. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his expression. Victoria means nothing beyond strategy, he said. The recording suggests otherwise. He did not answer. You've scheduled dinner tonight, she added. That's irrelevant. Conflict of interest disclosure requires relevance. He exhaled sharply. You're not thinking like a spouse. No, she agreed. I'm thinking like an officer. Silence stretched. He left without another word. By mid-afternoon, Shannon had composed a brief summary memo to herself outlining potential legal categories: breach of fiduciary duty, corporate governance violation, undisclosed conflict of interest, potential fraud, if misrepresentation to investors is established. She attached the audio file hash verification and logged the time of discovery. Then she opened her browser and returned to Rebecca Lawson's firm. She filled out the secure contact form, named Shannon Stevens. Subject, confidential consultation. Corporate governance and marital asset exposure. Brief description, potential fiduciary breach. Undisclosed executive conflict and financial misrepresentation. She did not elaborate further online. At 4:40 p.m., she received a response. Miss Stevens, we can meet tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. Confidential consultation. Rebecca Lawson, Shannon confirmed. At 6:00 p.m., she left the office. She did not go home immediately. Instead, she walked past the restaurant where Christopher's dinner was scheduled. Through the glass, she saw him seated across from Victoria in a private alcove. He leaned forward. Victoria reached across the table and touched his wrist. Intimate, unambiguous. Shannon did not enter. She did not photograph. She did not interrupt. Visual confirmation was unnecessary. The audio file had already documented intent. She returned home alone. Later that night, Christopher arrived after midnight. You followed me, he said. I confirmed, she replied. He looked almost exhausted. You don't have to do this. I already am. He lowered himself into a chair. What do you want, he asked. She considered the question carefully. Transparency, she said. And if I refuse, then procedure. He closed his eyes briefly. You'll ruin everything, no? She answered softly. You did. She went upstairs. Christopher remained in the darkened living room, finally understanding something he should have understood long ago. Shannon's silence had never meant ignorance. It had meant evidence collection. And now the evidence had a voice. Rebecca Lawson's office did not occupy the top floor of a glittering tower. It was 3 floors below the skyline, deliberately understated, discreet, functional. The reception area was quiet, finished in muted tones. No framed newspaper headlines. No photographs with public officials. Serious work did not require decoration. Shannon arrived at 8:52 a.m. She carried her leather portfolio and nothing else. When Rebecca Lawson entered the conference room at precisely 9:00, she did not extend immediate sympathy. She extended her hand. Miss Stevens, Shannon is fine. Rebecca studied her for half a second longer than courtesy required. Early 40s, controlled posture, eyes steady, not fragile. Everything we discuss is privileged from this moment forward, Rebecca said, closing the door. Shannon nodded. Rebecca did not ask for a summary. She waited. Shannon opened the portfolio and placed the documents on the table in careful order. Contract draft prior to modification, executed contract hash comparison sheet, system access logs, wire confirmations, advisory memos, celebration video clip saved to encrypted drive, audio file hash verification. I am Director of Contract Compliance at Stevens Capital Holdings, Shannon began. My husband is CEO. Rebecca did not react outwardly. He modified Exhibit A of a $120 million vendor contract 17 minutes before I signed it. Shannon continued. The modification removed independent audit verification and expanded discretionary bonus authority. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Was legal reapproval obtained? Number board notified non-vendor relationship disclosed as personal, no. Shannon placed the audio file transcript summary on the table. There's recorded discussion indicating premeditation reliance on my signature for public validation. Rebecca read quickly, efficiently. Have you preserved original metadata, she asked. Yes. Has he been informed you retained counsel? No. Rebecca sat back. You're dealing with 2 tracks, she said. Corporate exposure and marital exposure. I understand. Which is your priority? Integrity of record, Shannon replied. Rebecca held her gaze. You're not here out of anger. No. You're here because liability exists. Yes. Rebecca nodded once. Good. Emotional clients make tactical mistakes. Shannon did not smile. Rebecca tapped the contract pages lightly. This qualifies as potential breach of fiduciary duty if conflict of interest is proven and governance was intentionally circumvented. And the public representation? Shannon asked. If investors relied on mischaracterized compliance validation, exposure increases. Criminals? Shannon asked. Possibly. If material misrepresentation can be established. Rebecca folded her hands. Before escalation, we secure 3 things, she continued. 1, preservation of evidence through formal litigation hold. 2, independent forensic copy of digital records. 3, financial asset tracing in anticipation of divorce proceedings. The word divorce entered the room without ceremony. Shannon absorbed it. Yes, she said. Rebecca studied her expression. You expected that outcome. I expected consequence. Rebecca nodded. Are there children of or prenuptial agreement? Yes, 10 years ago. We'll review it. Rebecca opened a legal pad and began outlining immediate steps. I will draft a preservation notice to Stevens Capital's board and outside counsel. This compels retention of relevant documents. That will alert Christopher, Shannon said. Yes, that's acceptable, Rebecca continued. We'll also engage a forensic accountant to trace vendor payments and any indirect transfers. There may be more, Shannon said quietly. Rebecca's eyes lifted. More reserve allocation scheduled $20 million in 27 days. Rebecca made a note. Timing matters, she said. We may seek temporary injunctive relief to halt further discretionary transfers pending review. Shannon nodded. Rebecca leaned back again. Now the marital track, she said. Given the personal relationship with the vendor, undisclosed conflict and potential misuse of corporate funds, asset division, will be complex. I'm not seeking punishment, Shannon said. Rebecca's voice remained neutral. Punishment is not the objective. Protection is. Shannon considered that. Proceed, she said. Rebecca closed her folder. I'll have initial filings prepared within 48 hours. Discreetly, Shannon added. As discreetly as the law permits. They stood. At the door, Rebecca paused. One more question, she said. If he offers private settlement to avoid exposure, will you accept? Shannon did not answer immediately. Transparency first, she said. Rebecca gave a small nod. That answer will cost you, I know. Back at Stevens Capital, Christopher felt the shift before he saw it. Margaret Whitmore entered his office with a document in hand. This was delivered to the board's outside counsel this morning, she said. Christopher took the envelope. Litigation hold notice. From Rebecca Lawson. He read the first paragraph twice. This is ridiculous, he said. Margaret did not respond. She hired Lawson, he asked. Yes. Christopher's jaw tightened. She's overreacting. Margaret met his gaze. The audio file suggests otherwise. He froze. What audio file? Margaret held his stare. Do not ask questions you already know the answer to. His silence betrayed recognition. She had no right to access. It was in a shared drive. He turned toward the window, city skyline, blurred through tension. This will damage the company, he muttered. It may protect it, Margaret replied. He spun back. You're siding with her. I'm siding with governance. Christopher said nothing. The weight of Rebecca Lawson's name settled into the room like an approaching storm. Back in her own office, Shannon received confirmation that litigation hold notices had been acknowledged by external counsel. She forwarded the confirmation to her private archive. Then she drafted a brief internal memo, subject compliance review, Hale Strategic. To ensure full transparency and governance alignment, independent review procedures are being initiated. She did not mention divorce. She did not mention betrayal. She mentioned procedure. At 3:00 p.m., Christopher appeared in her doorway again. This ends now, he said quietly. It begins now, she corrected. You've triggered external review. Yes. You could have handled this privately. Private concealment created the problem. He stepped inside, closing the door. What do you want? He demanded. Disclosure, she said. And if I disclose, you mitigate. And if I refuse, You escalate. His voice dropped. You'll ruin my career. She held his gaze. I protected it for years. The truth hung between them. He had built momentum. She had built structure. Without structure, momentum collapsed. You're not thinking about us, he said. There is no us without integrity. For a moment, something almost like regret flickered across his face. Then it hardened. This isn't over, he said. No, she agreed. It isn't. He left. Shannon sat alone in the quiet aftermath. Litigation hold, forensic audit, board notification, divorce consultation. The architecture had shifted from internal doubt to formal process. There would be no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, no spectacle, just filings, records, depositions, evidence under oath. Christopher had chosen public humiliation as strategy. Shannon had chosen procedure as response. Procedure did not shout. It summoned. And summons once issued must be answered. The word discovery sounded almost harmless, like finding something misplaced. In reality, it was excavation. Rebecca Lawson moved quickly. Within 48 hours, formal notices had been issued, and outside counsel for Stevens Capital acknowledged receipt. The board had convened an emergency governance review session. Forensic preservation protocols were activated. The building felt different. Conversations quieted when Shannon passed. Doors closed faster. Assistants typed more carefully. Christopher did not avoid her. He performed composure. At 10:00 a.m., an email circulated from the board chair. Independent review procedures are underway. All relevant personnel are expected to cooperate fully. No names mentioned, but everyone knew. Shannon sat at her desk reviewing a deposition preparation memo Rebecca had sent early that morning. Key witnesses: Liam Porter, Executive Assistant; Daniel Reeves, CFO; Margaret Whitmore, General Counsel; Victoria Hale, Vendor Principal; Christopher Stevens, CEO; Shannon herself would also be deposed first as compliance officer, later as spouse in marital proceedings. She did not feel fear. She felt inevitability. At 11:15 a.m., Rebecca called. Forensic team confirmed audio file authenticity, she said. Metadata intact, no alteration. Good. Financial tracing reveals advisory bonuses routed directly to Hale Strategic LLC. No shell layering so far. Yet, Shannon said quietly. Rebecca paused. You expect more, I expect discretion where motive exists. Rebecca's tone sharpened slightly. We'll expand review. Meanwhile, Christopher met privately with 2 board members in his office. This is an overreaction driven by personal conflict, he said smoothly. Shannon is conflating marital tension with governance. The board members listened carefully. Were Exhibit A modifications disclosed to legal, one asked. They were minor adjustments, Christopher replied. Were they disclosed? A pause. Not formally. Was the vendor relationship personal? Christopher's jaw tightened. Not relevant to performance. That's not what we asked. Silence. The board members exchanged a glance. We'll let independent review determine relevance, one said finally. Christopher felt something shift beneath him. Not collapse, but instability. In her office, Shannon received a deposition schedule for Liam Porter. Friday, 9:00 a.m. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. Depositions were not weapons. They were mirrors. On Friday morning, Liam sat stiffly in a neutral conference room, a court reporter positioned beside him. Rebecca Lawson sat across from him, calm and precise. Shannon did not attend. She did not need to. Rebecca's voice remained even. Mr. Porter, did you receive an email from Christopher Stevens at 10:31 p.m. on the night the Hale contract was executed? Yes. What did it instruct to replace the prior Exhibit A attachment with a revised version? Did legal review that revised version before it was sent for signature? No. Did you understand why the replacement was necessary? I was told it was urgent. Were you aware of any personal relationship between Mr. Stevens and Miss Hale? Liam hesitated. Rebecca waited. I suspected, he said quietly. On what basis? Frequency of private meetings, travel overlap, tone of communication. Rebecca nodded once. Did you ever disclose that suspicion to legal or the board? No. Why he swallowed. It wasn't my place. That phrase would appear in the transcript. It wasn't my place. In Daniel Reeves's deposition later that afternoon, similar language surfaced. Were discretionary bonuses issued without independent verification? Rebecca asked. Yes. Why executive authorization? Did you consider potential conflict of interest? Daniel hesitated. Yes. Did you escalate that concern? No. Why he looked down. It wasn't my place. Patterns formed under oath. In the evening, Rebecca called Shannon again. Depositions are consistent, she said. Governance bypass confirmed. Conflict suspicion corroborated. And Victoria Shannon asked, tomorrow. Saturday morning felt quieter in Manhattan, but inside Rebecca's office, the atmosphere sharpened. Victoria Hale arrived dressed impeccably, posture intact, chin high. Rebecca wasted no time. Miss Hale, are you in a personal relationship with Christopher Stevens? Victoria's lawyer shifted slightly. Relevance, he asked. Conflict of interest, Rebecca replied. Victoria answered before her counsel could object further. Yes. The word did not tremble. How long, Rebecca asked. 7 months. Before or after the Hale contract negotiations began. During. Were you aware that discretionary bonus authority was expanded without independent audit verification? Victoria hesitated. I trusted Christopher. Did you discuss Exhibit A revisions with him? A longer pause. Yes. Rebecca slid a transcript of the audio file across the table. Is this your voice? Victoria's composure thinned. Yes. Did you understand that Shannon Stevens would rely on the prior draft when signing? Victoria's eyes flickered. I assumed she would review. That was not the question. Silence. Rebecca did not press further. She did not need to. By Monday morning, Christopher was scheduled. He entered the deposition room controlled but tight. Rebecca began simply, Mr. Stevens, did you modify Exhibit A 17 minutes before your wife signed the contract? Yes. Did you disclose those modifications to legal? No. Did you remove an independent audit verification clause? Yes. Why? To streamline performance payouts. Were you in a personal relationship with Victoria Hale at the time? A pause. Yes. Did you disclose that relationship to the board? No. Did you rely on Shannon Stevens' signature to provide public validation of compliance? Christopher's jaw flexed. No. Rebecca slid the video clip transcript across the table, and even she signed. He stared at it. That was humor, he said. Was it accurate silence? Was it accurate that she reviewed the modified Exhibit A? He did not answer. Mr. Stevens, no. The court reporter typed steadily. Outside the room, Rebecca stepped aside to call Shannon. He admitted modification, non-disclosure, and relationship, she said. Shannon closed her eyes briefly, not in relief, in acknowledgement. What now, she asked. Board emergency session this week. Potential suspension pending review. We'll file for temporary financial restraints tomorrow. And the divorce filed concurrently. Shannon absorbed the words. Filed. It sounded administrative. It was final. Christopher left the deposition room aware that control had shifted. Not dramatically, not publicly, but structurally. The architecture he relied upon, momentum charisma narrative, was being dismantled line by line. In her quiet office, Shannon opened her notebook once more. She wrote, admissions under oath, modification clause, removal, personal relationship, no disclosure. She underlined each point once. There was no satisfaction in it, only closure approaching. Discovery had done what discovery always does. It did not shout, it revealed. And revelation, once transcribed, becomes weight. No narrative can carry alone. The video from the ballroom had always been more than humiliation. It was context. Rebecca understood that instinctively. On Tuesday morning, she sat across from 2 members of the Stevens Capital Board and the company's outside counsel in a neutral conference room downtown. A large screen displayed a paused frame from the celebration, Christopher holding a glass Shannon beside him. Her signature magnified behind them. Rebecca pressed play. Christopher's voice filled the room, and even she signed. Laughter followed light, indulgent, unaware. Rebecca paused the clip precisely where the laughter peaked. Public representation, she said calmly, linking compliance validation to executive modification without disclosure. The board chair shifted in his seat. We've reviewed deposition transcripts, he said. Admissions are clear. Admissions establish internal breach, Rebecca replied. The video establishes external reliance. Outside counsel nodded slowly. If investors interpret compliance as fully informed, he said misrepresentation risk increases. Rebecca did not embellish. That is our position. The board chair folded his hands. What remedy are you seeking? Immediate suspension of discretionary bonus disbursements, independent forensic audit, public clarification regarding compliance review scope, and temporary separation of Mr. Stevens from executive decision-making pending outcome. Silence stretched. The board chair looked at the frozen frame again. Christopher smiling. Shannon composed, the screen glowing with a $120 million contract. He used her credibility, the chair said quietly. Yes, Rebecca replied. Across town, Christopher sat in his office staring at the same clip on his laptop. He had replayed it 5 times that morning. The laughter felt different now, not celebratory, careless. His phone buzzed. Board meeting, 2:00 p.m. Mandatory. He knew what that meant. In her own office, Shannon received confirmation from Rebecca that the board had convened emergency executive session. She did not ask for details yet. Instead, she opened her divorce filing draft. Petitioner Shannon Stevens. Respondent Christopher Stevens. Grounds cited irreconcilable differences and breach of fiduciary trust impacting marital estate. The phrasing was clinical. It needed to be. Rebecca had included a request for temporary financial restraints to prevent asset dissipation pending equitable distribution. Shannon read every line carefully, not as wife, as reviewer. She signed. Later that afternoon, the board meeting began. Christopher entered, composed but pale. The board chair spoke without ceremony. Admissions under oath confirm undisclosed conflict of interest and unilateral modification of governance controls. Christopher held his posture. The company remains profitable, he said. This is being exaggerated. Profit does not neutralize breach, the chair replied. Outside counsel added, we must mitigate liability exposure. Christopher leaned forward. I built this firm, and governance built trust, the chair responded. There was no anger in the room, only calculation. Effective immediately, the chair continued, discretionary disbursements under the Hale contract are suspended. An independent audit will proceed. Pending review, you are placed on temporary administrative leave. The words landed quietly. Administrative leave. Christopher stared at the table. This is her doing, he said finally. This is documentation, the chair corrected. Christopher did not argue further. He left the room, understanding that narrative control had shifted beyond his reach. Back at Stevens Capital, employees learned of the decision through a brief internal memo. Executive transition pending governance review. No scandal language, no accusation, just procedure. Shannon read the memo without visible reaction. At 4:30 p.m., her phone rang. Rebecca. Administrative leave confirmed, Rebecca said. And the public statement, Shannon asked. Drafting now. It will clarify that compliance review scope is under independent assessment. Shannon nodded. Victoria, she asked. Hale strategic contract under suspension review. Payments halted. There was a pause. Are you all right? Rebecca asked. Yes, you don't sound relieved. Relief implies victory. And this isn't. This is correction. Rebecca did not argue. That evening, Shannon returned to the townhouse before Christopher. The house felt different already. Quieter, larger. She walked through each room without urgency. The study still held framed awards bearing Christopher's name. Photographs from galas, press clippings. Momentum artifacts. At 7:12 p.m., the front door opened. Christopher entered slowly. They suspended me, he said. I know. He removed his jacket, but did not hang it carefully this time. They froze payments. Yes. He looked at her directly. You wanted this. No, she replied. I wanted transparency. You destroyed my credibility. You used mine. Silence lingered. He moved toward the living room and sat heavily in a chair. You filed, he said quietly. Yes. He laughed once, short and hollow. So that's it. It began when you modified the contract. You could have talked to me. I did. He looked up sharply. You could have forgiven? For what? He did not answer. For dishonesty, she continued. For concealment, for using my signature as insulation. He rubbed his temples. I didn't think it would go this far. Oh, she believed him. You thought applause was protection, she said. He lowered his hands. What do you want now? Orderly separation. And the company governance. And us, there is no us without trust. The words did not tremble. He leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally overtaking posture. I never meant to humiliate you, he said. You did. Silence followed. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Inside, something settled. Not anger, not reconciliation, resolution. Later that night, Shannon received a draft of the public clarification statement from Rebecca. It read, Stevens Capital confirms that compliance review of the Hale Strategic Agreement is under independent assessment. Statements made at the launch event reflected general procedural confidence and not individualized clause verification. Carefully worded, measured, it would not erase the video, but it would contextualize it. Shannon approved the wording. Before going to bed, she opened her notebook once more. She wrote, Board action initiated, payments suspended, divorce filed. She did not underline anything. She closed the notebook gently. Christopher remained downstairs long after midnight, staring at the dark television screen that once displayed his reflection during rehearsed interviews. He understood something now that he had not understood on the ballroom stage. Public humiliation does not dissipate. It echoes. And when echo meets documentation, the louder voice does not win. The clearer one does. Upstairs, Shannon turned off the light without tears. The climax had not been explosive. It had been procedural. And procedure once set in motion does not require applause. It requires patience. The narrative began to fracture publicly 3 days after Christopher's administrative leave was announced. It did not collapse. It cracked. Financial outlets that had once praised Stevens Capital's bold expansion now added cautious language to their coverage. Governance review underway. Independent audit initiated. Executive temporarily stepping aside. The words were measured, but investors understood subtext. Inside the building, the atmosphere shifted from tension to recalibration. Meetings resumed. Decisions continued. The firm did not implode. Momentum without spectacle was still momentum. Shannon remained in her office, reviewing routine compliance reports unrelated to Hale Strategic. She did not avoid her responsibilities. She did not dramatize the moment. Professional continuity was its own statement. At 10:20 a.m., Rebecca called. Victoria Hale's counsel reached out, she said. And Shannon asked, They're exploring settlement options. On what basis potential reputational damage claim? Shannon almost smiled. She discussed manipulating contract review, she said evenly. Yes, and accepted discretionary bonuses under undisclosed conflict. Yes, Rebecca's tone sharpened slightly. She's attempting to distance herself from Christopher. Will that change liability? Shannon asked. No, it may redistribute it. That afternoon, Victoria arrived unannounced at Stevens Capital. Not in silver, not in performance, in a navy suit that signaled seriousness. She requested a meeting with Shannon. The receptionist hesitated before calling upstairs. Shannon considered the request for 3 seconds. Send her in, she said. Victoria entered with controlled composure. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Thank you for seeing me, she began. This is a workplace, Shannon replied. What do you need? Victoria closed the door. I want to clarify something, she said. I never intended for this to escalate. Escalation followed concealment, Shannon said calmly. Victoria shifted slightly. I trusted Christopher. That was your decision. You're making this sound deliberate. It was recorded. Victoria inhaled sharply. I didn't know you'd find that file. That was not my responsibility. Silence stretched. Victoria's confidence faltered. He told me you barely read exhibits, she said quietly. I read patterns, Shannon replied. Victoria's eyes flickered. He said the discretionary clause was temporary. It was executed. He said everyone benefits. Everyone did not. Victoria's voice tightened. I didn't force him to change the contract. No, Shannon agreed. You benefited from it. Victoria hesitated. I'm willing to return the advisory bonuses, she said. The offer hung in the air. That is between you and the board, Shannon replied. You could influence that, Victoria said. Shannon studied her. Influence is what created this. Victoria fell silent. For a moment, something like regret crossed her expression. I didn't expect him to position you like that on stage, she admitted. Shannon's gaze did not waver. He relied on my credibility. Victoria nodded faintly. I didn't realize the cost. It was not yours to calculate. Victoria exhaled. If I cooperate fully, will you push for criminal charges? Shannon's voice remained level. I don't push, I document. The distinction unsettled Victoria more than anger would have. Christopher said you wouldn't destroy him, she said quietly. I did not. Shannon replied. He destroyed himself. Victoria's shoulders lowered slightly. I'll speak to my counsel, she said. That would be wise. Victoria left without another word. Shannon did not feel triumph, only confirmation. By late afternoon, Rebecca called again. Victoria's attorney is offering restitution, she said. Under what terms? Return of advisory bonuses plus cooperation in audit findings. And non-disclosure. They'll request it. Shannon paused. Transparency first, she said. Rebecca nodded audibly over the line. I expected that answer. Meanwhile, Christopher sat in his study at home, scrolling through media updates. He had not issued a statement. He had not denied anything publicly. Silence was no longer strategic. It was containment. The divorce filing had been formally served that morning. He read the document twice. Irreconcilable differences, breach of fiduciary trust, marital asset protection. The language felt colder than accusation. It felt final. At 6:30 p.m., he approached Shannon in the kitchen. You met with her, he said. Yes. What did she say that she trusted you? He flinched slightly. You're enjoying this, he accused. No. You could have ended this quietly. I offered you disclosure, and you offered no forgiveness. She set down the glass she had been holding. Forgiveness requires acknowledgement. He stared at her. I made a mistake. You engineered a strategy. He shook his head. It was about growth. It was about control. Silence pressed between them. You're dismantling everything we built, he said. She met his gaze steadily. We built structure. You built narrative. He had no answer. Later that evening, the board released a brief public update. Independent review has identified governance irregularities associated with the Hale strategic agreement. Discretionary compensation clauses are under reevaluation. No further disbursements will occur pending audit completion. Careful language, controlled damage, but damage nonetheless. Shannon read the statement without reaction. In her notebook, she wrote, Vendor restitution discussion initiated. Governance irregularities acknowledged publicly. She did not underline. She did not embellish. Upstairs, Christopher packed a small suitcase. Administrative leave required physical distance from the office. The divorce filing required physical distance from the house. He paused at the bedroom doorway. Is this what dignity looks like to you? He asked. Yes, she said quietly. He studied her for a long moment. You never shouted. No. You never begged. No. You just documented. Yes. He nodded faintly as if understanding too late. I thought you'd fight me, he said. I did, she replied, without raising her voice. She did not answer. He left. The house closed around silence once more. In the days that followed, Victoria returned a portion of the advisory bonuses into escrow pending audit resolution. The board initiated formal review of executive oversight structures. Christopher's name was removed from the website temporarily, momentum recalibrated. Shannon continued arriving at the office at 5:30 a.m. coffee, emails, documentation. She did not celebrate Christopher's absence. She did not relish Victoria's retreat. She did not gloat over headlines. She had never wanted spectacle, only clarity. And clarity, once achieved, did not glow under chandeliers. It settled quietly into record. The cracks in the narrative were no longer deniable. They were printed, filed, stamped. And once stamped, they did not disappear. They waited for final judgment. The courtroom was smaller than the ballroom had been. No chandeliers, no orchestra, no applause. Just fluorescent, light-polished wood and the quiet shuffle of legal files against a judge's bench. Christopher Stevens had once filled rooms with momentum. Now he sat at a narrow table beside his attorney, posture straight but diminished by proportion. The architecture here did not respond to charisma. Shannon sat across from him, not in black this time, in gray, neutral, professional, deliberate. Rebecca Lawson stood beside her, organized, precise, unmoved by spectacle. A settlement conference had been scheduled, first an opportunity for resolution before extended litigation. But the independent audit findings had already shifted leverage. The judge entered without ceremony. "Counsel," she said, scanning the docket. "We are here regarding Stevens v. Stevens with related governance disclosures referenced in ancillary filings." Rebecca rose. "Yes, Your Honor." Christopher's attorney followed. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge glanced at the preliminary summary. Independent audit confirms unilateral modification of executive compensation clauses, removal of third-party audit requirement, undisclosed conflict of interest, and discretionary vendor disbursement totaling $13.7 million prior to suspension. Silence settled across the room. Christopher's attorney shifted in his seat. "Your Honor, the funds were authorized under executive authority. Authority does not negate disclosure," the judge interrupted calmly. Rebecca stepped forward. "Your Honor, we are not seeking punitive damages. We are seeking structured separation, financial transparency, and formal acknowledgement of breach impacting marital estate and professional standing." The judge nodded once. "And the Corporate Matter Board governance review remains ongoing," Rebecca replied. "However, vendor restitution of advisory bonuses has entered escrow pending final audit reconciliation." Christopher kept his gaze forward. The judge turned to him directly. "Mr. Stevens, do you dispute the audit findings?" He paused. In another setting, he might have reframed the question. Redirected, elevated the narrative. Here the question required only yes or no. "No," he said quietly. The word felt heavier than any speech he had given. "Do you dispute the undisclosed personal relationship during vendor negotiations?" the judge continued. "No." "Do you dispute removal of independent audit verification clause without legal reapproval?" "No." The record reflected admissions already given under oath. This was not revelation. It was formal acknowledgement. Rebecca outlined proposed terms. Equitable division of marital assets reflecting pre- and post-breach valuations. Protective language, preserving Shannon's professional reputation. Prohibition on public mischaracterization of compliance involvement. Full financial disclosure of all executive-controlled accounts. Spousal support waiver in exchange for asset equity realignment. Christopher's attorney reviewed the proposal with controlled frustration. "Your Honor, my client has already suffered professional consequence," he said. "Administrative leave, reputational harm, consequences are not punishment." The judge replied evenly, "They are results." Rebecca did not react. Christopher finally spoke. "What does she want?" he asked, looking at Shannon for the first time since entering the room. The judge glanced toward her. Mrs. Stevens Shannon rose slowly. "I want separation without distortion," she said. The room waited. I want the record to reflect that my compliance approval relied on incomplete disclosure. I want no future public suggestion otherwise. Her voice did not tremble. She did not look at Christopher. The judge nodded. That is reasonable. Christopher swallowed. You could have destroyed me, he said quietly. Shannon did not respond. Rebecca answered instead. Documentation did that. The judge leaned back. I will recommend settlement under outlined terms. Formal decree to follow within 30 days. No gavel slammed dramatically. No visible collapse. Just a signature scheduled for a future date. After the conference concluded, the hallway outside the courtroom felt strangely calm. Christopher lingered near the wall while his attorney stepped aside to take a call. Shannon stood with Rebecca reviewing final adjustments to the settlement draft. When Rebecca stepped away briefly, Christopher approached. Shannon. She turned. For the first time in months, there was no audience. No board, no investors, no cameras. Just two people in a hallway with fluorescent lighting. I misjudged you, he said. Yes, she replied. I thought you'd fight emotionally. I fought structurally. He nodded faintly. I never thought you'd go this far. You went first. He exhaled. Was there ever a moment you would have stayed? She considered the question. Yes, she said. His eyes lifted slightly. If you had disclosed. Silence stretched. I didn't think you'd look past the summary page, he admitted. I always do, she replied. There was no cruelty in her voice, only fact. He glanced down at his hands. Victoria returned the bonuses, he said. I know. She won't recover professionally. That is not my objective, and mine, he asked quietly. That is not my responsibility. The hallway door opened as Rebecca returned. Ready, she asked Shannon. Yes. Christopher stepped back. There was no dramatic goodbye, no tears, no embrace, just acknowledgement of consequence. In the weeks that followed, the board completed its independent review. Executive oversight protocols were strengthened. Discretionary authority required multi-signature approval. Conflict of interest disclosures became mandatory. Christopher resigned formally rather than return under restriction. A short press release announced transition in leadership. Victoria's contract was terminated with partial restitution applied to escrow settlements. She disappeared from financial headlines within a month. Shannon remained. Not as a symbol, not as a martyr, as compliance. On the day the divorce decree was finalized, she walked into the courthouse alone, signed, walked out. The sky was overcast, the city loud and indifferent. There were no cameras, no applause, no humiliation, just documentation. Back at the townhouse, soon to be listed for sale, she packed carefully. Awards in boxes, books in labeled cartons. The leather notebook placed gently into her briefcase. Christopher did not return to collect his belongings while she was there. Distance had replaced confrontation. On her final evening in the house, she stood in the doorway of the living room where the television once displayed the ballroom clip over and over. The house no longer felt heavy. It felt empty. Which was different? She turned off the lights and closed the door without looking back. There had been no revenge, no spectacle, no public dismantling, only evidence. And evidence once acknowledged in a courtroom did not require humiliation in return. It required closure. Christopher had once believed public laughter secured authority. But authority without integrity dissolves under oath. Shannon did not win loudly. She left cleanly. And sometimes that is the only form of justice that endures. The new apartment was smaller, not modest, not fragile, just proportioned differently. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the East River, but the space itself felt contained, intentional rather than expansive. Shannon chose it for its quiet, for the absence of marble echo and chandelier glare, for the way sound settled instead of magnified. Boxes lined the hallway for 2 days before she unpacked them. She did not rush. Transition deserved pacing. On her first morning there, she woke at 5:30 a.m. out of habit. The city outside was a muted gray fairy lights gliding across water like disciplined punctuation marks. She brewed coffee and opened her laptop at the small dining table. Her email inbox was already full. Board update memos, compliance audit summaries, internal restructuring proposals. Stevens Capital Holdings had appointed an interim CEO from outside the firm. Governance reforms were underway. New oversight committees formed. The discretionary clause policy had been rewritten entirely. Christopher's name had been removed from the executive leadership page. No dramatic condemnation, just revision. Shannon reviewed the audit's final executive summary. Findings: unilateral modification of vendor contract without required disclosure. Removal of independent audit verification. Undisclosed personal relationship constituting conflict of interest. Improper discretionary disbursement prior to governance review. Corrective actions. Executive authority limitation protocols implemented. Multi-signature approval requirement for all vendor compensation above threshold. Mandatory annual conflict of interest certification. The document was 14 pages long. It did not mention humiliation. It did not mention laughter. It mentioned process. That was enough. Later that morning, she walked to the office for the first time from her new apartment. The route was different, shorter, more direct. No chauffeur. No ceremonial entrance. Inside the building, conversations no longer quieted when she passed. They resumed normally. She was no longer the woman on the ballroom screen. She was the compliance officer who had followed procedure. Margaret Whitmore stopped by mid-morning. "You're settling in?" Margaret asked gently. "Yes." Margaret hesitated. "The board appreciates your steadiness." Shannon did not respond to the compliment. "Steadiness is structural," she said instead. Margaret allowed herself a small smile. Christopher reached out to request reference documentation for personal financial reconciliation, she added carefully. "Provide what is required under settlement terms," Shannon replied. Nothing more. That evening, Shannon received a brief email from Christopher. Subject: closure. I won't contest the final division terms. I underestimated you. I underestimated process. I hope someday you remember something before this. She read it once. She did not reply. Not because she was cold. Because there was nothing left to document. Weeks passed. The townhouse sold quietly. Victoria's name appeared briefly in a trade publication announcing her departure from Hale Strategic Media. No follow-up article. No redemption arc. Christopher relocated out of state, accepting a consulting role with a smaller private equity firm. Lower profile, less visibility, no ballroom. One evening, Shannon attended a governance symposium hosted at Columbia University. She was invited not as scandal participant, but as panel contributor on compliance evolution. The auditorium was modest compared to the Dominion Hotel's ballroom. Academic lighting, rows of students and professionals. When her turn to speak came, she did not reference her own story directly. She spoke about structural oversight, about how systems fail not because rules are absent, but because rules are bypassed under confidence. Governance isn't distrust, she said evenly. It's continuity. A student asked, "How do you handle personal relationships that complicate professional integrity?" The room quieted. Shannon answered carefully. "You separate them before they require documentation," she said. "If you don't, documentation will separate them for you." There was no applause at that line, only thoughtful silence. Later that night, walking home along the river, she thought briefly of the ballroom. The chandeliers, the screen, the laughter. It felt distant, not erased, archived. She understood something now that she had not articulated before. Humiliation is loud. Integrity is quiet. Humiliation seeks witnesses. Integrity seeks record. Christopher had invited her onto a stage to make her small. He believed public framing could diminish her authority. But public framing had instead created timestamp, evidence, sequence. He had tried to make her signature a shield. She had made it a reference point. In the quiet of her new apartment, Shannon unpacked the leather notebook one final time. She flipped through the pages slowly. date, file name, version number, time received, time signed, observations. At the final page, she wrote a single closing entry, matter resolved through procedure. She did not underline it. She closed the notebook and placed it in a drawer. Not hidden, not displayed, stored. Weeks later, a revised Stevens Capital annual report was released. It included a new section titled Governance Integrity Framework. Her name appeared under Compliance Oversight Lead. No mention of past irregularities, no public rewriting of history, just continuity. Christopher saw the report. He closed it after a few minutes. He understood something then. He had once believed that strength required control of narrative. He had mistaken volume for authority. Shannon had never raised her voice. She had never mocked him publicly. She had never returned humiliation with spectacle. She had walked into court, into boardrooms, into audit sessions, with the same calm posture she carried into the ballroom. She had not destroyed him. She had declined to protect him from himself. And that distinction was permanent. On a quiet Sunday morning, months later, Shannon stood at her window watching the river move in steady rhythm. Water did not argue with obstacles. It flowed around them. It recorded them in its path. And eventually, it wore them down. She turned away from the glass-brewed coffee and opened her laptop to review a new vendor contract. Exhibit A. She read every line, not because she feared repetition, but because reading fully had always been who she was. The ballroom lights were long extinguished. The laughter had faded into archived clips. The contract remained in record. So did the correction. Justice had not arrived with spectacle. It had arrived with signature, and she had walked away with hers intact. If this story stayed with you, sit with it for a moment. Justice is rarely loud. It rarely explodes in one dramatic scene. More often, it unfolds in documents in patience, in the refusal to answer humiliation with noise. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, tell me where you are and what your local time is. I read every comment, and I'm always reminded how many quiet stories exist behind different windows and time zones. If stories about dignity evidence and quiet strength matter to you, you're welcome to stay connected here. Not for spectacle, but for truth that unfolds slowly.